Alright, so in my last video I had a conversation kind of going on with a chatter, and then I realized that nobody else is going to see this. And so I said, screw it, I'll just make a video about it. And his overall concept was that this is how the game is made, and if you don't like it, if you're not enjoying it, it's just not a game for you, maybe you should just move on. And so I really just want to talk about why I don't think that's a good way to think that, a game is just how it is a good way to think about live service game, an online game. This ended with me saying that games are only mediocre if you accept mediocre. So to start things off, I think a lot of gamers really tend to forget about the power they have over the games, especially if they are a live service online game. I think the MMO space itself is a little bit worse than the others, if I'm being honest. I think this space is filled with a lot of veterans from a lot of MMOs, and they've already kind of been defeated by other games. And in the West, we really only have like the big three, and then there's just other games, which the big three would be WoW, Final Fantasy, and OSRS. Everything else is kind of like life support-ish, but I think people often just kind of forget that developers actually need your time and money to survive. You don't need them, they need you. Which is why I say that games can only be mediocre if you accept mediocre. You are giving them the okay to do this because you're still supporting them. And I'll talk about this and me a little bit more later. Like, imagine if people took this entire mindset of like, the game's fine, don't worry about it, nothing's wrong with it, and they applied that to Concord. Well, okay, some people actually did, but yeah, that didn't go too well. And that's obvious because the vast majority just hated the game. And obviously there was a lot of factors that this is not a Concord video, let's move on. Ultimately, in this online and live service space, all these games are competing to basically monopolize you. So it is important for them to keep up with our best interest. And I think overall, more and more in this space, we are starting to see this more often. And I'm gonna use The First Descendant as another great example of this. They are ran by Nexon, a Korean company that responds to feedback in the West within a day. They have addressed and fixed problems within a week, and guess what? We don't have to wait for it. We get them right away too. They not only know there is competition, but they know their competition. And I think that's really what pushes them to constantly just address things and update. So I want to take a little moment and talk a little bit about me. Two other things that have been very important in my life is going to be art and fighting games. My perspective on both of these things is that you learn the best from feedback and also from failure. In art, we had a lot of critiques in our classes. In there, we had a lot of constructive criticism. Like, if the perspective fell off, people would talk about it. If maybe some lighting was off, maybe the reflection was off, we would talk about that. In a similar vein, in fighting games, if you get your ass beat, you were there, you saw why you got hit, or why you dropped the combo. Constantly winning doing the same thing over and over generally will create bad habits that somebody's going to abuse later on. To me, a loss isn't a loss if you learn from it. And I guess the last thing to say is that I do have a degree in game design. I did work in publishing for quite a long time. No, I'm not saying that to give myself authority to say whatever I want, I'm just saying that I really do love gaming. And it's something I thought was going to be a major part of my life in quite a different way than what it is now. But it's these three things about me that really contribute to how I think about things, and I really wanted to just share that with you. Alright, so in the space of Lost Ark, I think it's really weird to have this defeatist mentality where this is just how the game is, it won't change, stop talking about it. And that's because Lost Ark is no stranger to change. I mean, the game was on the verge of shutting down on Season 1, and that's why Season 2 came to be. That's why they reworked so many systems and everything about the game. Gold River and Smilegate, they realized that the game needed to change, it needed a shot in the arm. And they did exactly just that. They turned the game around. It became a very popular game. That's why we have it here in the West, is because it did so well in Korea. While it might not be the most popular game over there anymore, it's still doing pretty well to my knowledge. And in a similar vein, I think that, Season 3 is also a recognition that things do need to change again. However, this time they're trying to not just completely tear down the foundation. Like, Arc Passive to me is a recognition that over this time of Season 2 that they've added too many power systems and it's been just too much bloat and too much to it. And that's why they're condensing it all into, a lot of it I should say, into the Arc Passive. I personally would have rather seen them replace the old system with the Arc Passive, but at least we got this. And also, let's not forget that they did in the past change Guardians from 2 to 1. They are changing it in Tier 4 for Chaos to be 2 to 1. They are actively trying to make changes, but they're just not trying to be too drastic with it. Which, to the topic of my last video, if you follow the line long enough, it will lead to monetization. So something I think people tend to forget is localization is beyond just making the game playable in other regions. It is making the game work, making the game successful in that region as well. Tencent, the publisher of the Chinese version of Lost Ark, realized that after the community took a pretty big dip. From my understanding, people were very unhappy, they were very not generous with what they did, and because of that, they made a lot of huge changes that not only they loved, but people in the other regions, like over here in the West, we loved their changes. And I want to say that, like, AGS in the West, we have gotten events, we have gotten vendors, we have gotten things to help us, But overall, they're not like core fundamental changes. They are band-aids, they are vendors. Like I said, they're not a change to the actual stuff you do. But now even AGS is talking about how saving Lost Ark in the West. And now they're talking about how they want feedback, they want people to talk about things, they want to know what they can change. I think that AGS and Smilegate, they're ready to actually properly localize Lost Ark for the West, our client. Actually make it more friendly for our player base. Because history shows that games that are designed around Korean player base, the Korean habits and how they play games, and how they just overall address games doesn't really work that well in the West. And the head of AGS considers Lost Ark a failure. And I don't think that's really too surprising if we look at the Steam charts and we look at the peak versus what we have on the day of a major patch, which we have like 2% of the player base that we once had. I think it's really undeniable that Lost Ark does not have really good player retention. And now I really want to talk about how toxicity in gaming is really bad, but also I think toxic positivity is actually worse. Going back up to Lost Ark losing 98% of its player base, for example. If everybody just glazed the game and said, oh, it's great, it's perfect, nothing's wrong with it, it's fine. But clearly, when they see their numbers, they see their player count, something's wrong. But if all they get for feedback is people glazing it, they don't know what to change, they don't know where to look, they don't know what's wrong. And that gets even worse when these people are attacking people for saying anything remotely negative because they take everything extremely personal. Meanwhile, if somebody's just at least just a toxic asshole, like that guy who just like posts like progression sucks or elixir sucks and just says nothing else, while it would have been better if they explained why they don't like it or why they think it sucks, at least they're saying something that gives a direction to look. If a ton of people are bitching about the same thing, I think that's a reasonable reason to go look at that exact thing. And for that reason, yes, I think toxic positivity is worse. Alright, I'm gonna be honest here. Me and everybody else who wants change in the game and is still playing that, we are part of the problem to some degree. Because at the end of the day, if you're still playing the game, you are still actively supporting it. And they made the big changes because people were not actively playing Lost Ark anymore, so they had to redo the game, basically. And the same can be said about Final Fantasy and ARR. But for me, I still want to play the game, I still want to see where it goes, but I still want to talk about it. I try to make this content about aspects of the game and discuss them in a civil and constructive manner, and I want my channel and this community to be ones that can do that. I think as long as you present your reasoning and argument well, a good conversation can come out of it. And that's even if you still disagree at the end. And just so a few final notes, just like when I talk about art in fighting games and learning from your mistakes, I do 100% believe that applies to games and developers. I do think that with the proper feedback and with the proper changes, they could still make Lost Ark into a really great game. I think they could really have a really good redemption arc with the game. Because again, they already had it once with Season 2. The software/hardware change is I bought a Stream Deck Plus because I really wanted to use the Wavelength software, give that a shot, and I figured the Stream Deck might be actually pretty useful if I do transition to streaming. My other option was to get like the Shure MV7 Plus because that has like built-in noise cancelling and stuff like that, but I decided this was a cheaper and more universal option. Overall, I've gotten good feedback from it so far. I've made some changes now to the EQ and stuff from the comp that I got before, so hopefully this sounds a little bit better. If not, tell me, I'll change some things again and see where we go. Unironically talking about feedback in a video where I talk about feedback. So yeah, that will be it for the video, and so as always, thanks for watching, like, sub, and yap in the comments.